Hey people, it's not okay. Now I'd just like to say a quick shout out. I know that it's Juneteenth, so shout out to all my Tijuana Black American viewers. I hope you enjoy this holiday, and it's Friday, so it's a holy day as well. So anyway, I hope you all have a good Juneteenth. Now let's get on with the story. Now this is from NBC News. A COVID-19 vaccine will work only if trials include black participants, experts say. The reason I hear African Americans will not participate are heartbreaking and disappointing. I've heard about the Tuskegee experiment a lot. Dr. Anita Patel, Director of Antibody Discovery and Vaccine Development, lifts a vial of... That's not irrelevant. Califia Hodges has an arduous task. Persuade black people who have a deep mistrust of experimental drugs and medical institutions to participate in clinical trials to help find a vaccine for the deadly coronavirus. It's quite the paradox. African Americans have been disproportionately devastated by COVID-19, but they are inadequately represented in human studies that would treat a disease that has claimed more than 116,000 lives in the United States. Almost a quarter of those were black, according to a study called Color of Coronavirus by APM Research Lab. Well, first off, let's deal with this where it says disproportionately devastated. First off, the majority of the essential workers who are out are black, because through economic sabotage, they have not been allowed to get to the higher levels of American society that everyone else has. That's why they're out there risking exposure. Secondly, there's all sorts of institutional racism that has made them more vulnerable. Food deserts, lack of bad health, and all sorts of things, lack of access to healthcare, which all have contributed to having a poorer state of health overall than the rest of the American society. That's why they're dying in higher numbers. It's not because blacks are inherently sicker just because. It's all because it's been engineered into that position. And that's why I do what I do, said Hodges, a clinician at Infinite Clinical Trials outside Atlanta. And that's why I'm here in this neighborhood that is predominantly African American. African American participation in the trial is critical. Medical experts have said researchers of pharmacogenetics, the science that studies how genetic factors affect reaction to drugs, stress that medicine could produce different results based on race and genetic, socio-economic, environmental dynamics. A vaccine might not work in if African Americans do not participate in the clinical trials to create the drug. And so the power of persuasion ranks high on Hodges' job. She has to overcome the study of untreated syphilis in the Negro male. One infected black man was solicited to be a part of a 40-year study, 1932 to 1972. To treat the disease with penicillin were offered free medical exams, free meals, and burial insurance. I want to stop you all right there. Now, they want to talk about this as if it's a long time ago. You know, studies on black people for medical purposes go back a long way and have never stopped. You know, that was 88 years ago that it started, and the last person who died of it was, I think, 2009. That wasn't a long time ago. And there were tests in Nigeria where Pfizer went and tested their polio drug in Kano. There were the French doctors who were just a few months ago talking about, man, there's so little medical laws in Africa. We should test our drugs out there and see how it works, like basically using black people as guinea pigs. And they want black people to ignore their lived experience. They're basically saying, why can't you be like those other black people who just queue up at Popeyes for a burger? Why can't you be more like them and ignore everything you know and have experienced? Anyway, one last thing I want to say. They're using black people as the faces in this article. I could see them. And that's not new. In Tuskegee, they used a black woman to persuade the men because they would not have trusted a white doctor to inject them, but they would have trusted the black woman because she was, quote-unquote, one of their own. Coons have always been around. Anyway, let's keep going. But they were not given the drug, and 28 of the original 399 black men died of syphilis. 100 died of related complications, 40 of their wives were infected, and 19 of their children were born with congenital syphilis. Man, that is evil. The dark past remains a hurdle to clear. It's laughable if it wasn't so horrible. I mean, how they think black Americans are just complete idiots who don't have any sense. Like, who would believe these people with this kind of history? Seriously. The reasons I hear African Americans will not participate are heartbreaking and disappointing, Hodges said. I've heard about the Tuskegee experiment a lot, and I've heard doctors will give me the virus and they will put a chip inside me. Many say their parents raised them to never participate in medical research. It's all tough to overcome. I actually had a follower whose grandparent, or I think his great grandparent, took part in this. So it's not hard for me to understand, and these are very common sense reactions. I mean, let me ask you, the listener, if you were Jewish and a German said, we want to just run some medical experiments, would you go along with that? I don't think so. In fact, it'd be offensive to even ask you. But this is the kind of bullshit that black people are supposed to accept. Dr. Larry Graham, a retired pulmonologist, understands the lack of trust, but insists that African Americans have to get over it. There we go again. Get over it, get over it, get over it. Same thing with everything else. Just get over it. Genetics related to racial differences make it essential that we be involved in broad-based and diverse clinical trials of medications and vaccines, he said. The expanding discipline of pharmacogenetics has taught us that we may respond differently than other races to both medicines and vaccines. We must be sure it works in black folks. This can only be determined by our inclusion in the research-based trial of such vaccines. But Dr. Alifa Maybank, the American Medical Association Chief Equity Officer and Group Vice President of the Center for Health Equity, what the hell does that even mean? Said she is concerned that there is not urgency from institutions to include African Americans in the myriad vaccine studies underway. There is a fear with COVID-19 how intentional the hundreds of trials are about diversity, Maybank said. I'm not clear and would make the assumption that they are not intentional. If so, I haven't heard about it yet. But if the distrust pre-COVID-19 was strong, the chances are even less now that black people will participate. I'm worried about exploitation and medicines being used on patients without their knowledge or consent. Have people forgotten that just a few months ago, people were saying, how come there aren't more cases in Africa, basically saying, why won't they die? Why won't they die? It was very sick to watch, really. I mean, it was expected, but still horrible. Hodges said coronavirus human trials at her location will not occur for another month or two. She has been successful in getting African Americans to participate in other trials, most recently for women who experience hot flushes through distributing educational pamphlets. Information is power, she said. Yes, and they don't have information. It also helps the Hodges is black. They see me and give me a chance to at least share my information with them, she said. I told you. They will use your own to brainwash you and to trick you. I'm telling you, nothing has changed. The more things change, the more they say the same. In extreme cases, she said, she invokes the experience of some cancer patients to make her point. When the patient with cancer hears there's nothing else we can do, they often turn to clinical trials, Hodges said. It's the last resort. With the coronavirus, the question becomes, would you rather be on a ventilator or try a drug? That's a view that might get people to participate. So basically scare otherwise healthy people to take potentially deadly drugs. Medical ethics be damned. For Maybank, the way to bridge the divide is simple. Work at it. With any relationship, you build it, she said. Folks doing work from leading institutions have asked, how do we build trust? Well, it's not rocket science. It's about building relationships. Are you getting to know me beforehand? Are you speaking in a language I understand? Are the concepts broken down so that they are digestible? Are you present? Are you giving resources to our neighborhoods beforehand? That's not rocket science. It's building a relationship. That's how you build trust, and trust is a fundamental value in humans. There's no rocket science behind it. Dr. John Maupin, the former president of Meharry Medical College and Morehouse School of Medicine, said a collection of historically black colleges and universities that focus on public health is working to form a consortium that will focus on culturally sensitive care. Specific clinical research, he said, how do you administer treatments? Do you present a cure at an earlier or later stage? Is a higher dosage needed? These questions have to be answered because everybody is different. Races have different genetic makeup and genetic impact. So it's critically important that clinical trials across the spectrum of individual differences that pick up the minute differences that may not be noticed from one racial makeup to another. That's why we have to be there. Maupin acknowledges that the challenge to change minds is significant. The problem is, do I trust them? That's why the ability for a Morehouse and Meharry to have a clinical research center is vital. He said it will allow black people to come. We have to have more HBCUs conducting trials because people... That's ridiculous. I mean, do you know that Tuskegee University, the university founded by black people, was involved in that? It doesn't mean anything to have HBCU involved. Again, they think black people don't know anything because people will trust them more than they will some other institution. I'm not saying all are untrustworthy. I'm saying there will be greater trust in institutions than by those who come from the patient's background. Hodges took it a step further, often tell patients they have a chance to take a drug that not only could help them, but could be very important to the next generation. Yeah, well, I've said all the commentary I want to say, and frankly, you all know. I mean, I'm sure most of you who've followed me know exactly how I think and agree with me. But anyway, I've said all I need to say. Please comment, rate, share, and subscribe. I'm going to leave this article in the description so you can read it yourself, and I will show you. When you look at the photos, I think this guy, I'm not sure if he's mixed, this Dr. Mopin, but the other two are definitely black, and they're using them to trick black people to trust them into taking these medications. Don't fall for it. Please comment, rate, share, and subscribe. Peace.